Welcome into another edition of Checkerboard Chat. I am Ryan Schumpert, joined as always by Ryan Cruz, my co-sports editor here at the Daily Beacon. And we got a lot to get into today. It's been a busy week of Tennessee athletics. Tennessee basketball team has a missed opportunity slip through its fingers down at Auburn on the weekend, and before a disappointing effort on the road at Arkansas Wednesday night, and then the Tennessee Lady Vols had a losing skid extend to 5 games before finally ending that losing skid Sunday with a win against Vanderbilt. And the Tennessee baseball team having definitely the best week of any of those three teams. They go 3-0 down in Round Rock at the Round Rock Classic, beating top 5 team in Texas Tech, and then getting 2 other solid wins over Houston and Stanford before returning home and blowing out a couple midweek games this week. But let's start with the men's basketball team, and well, it looked like Tennessee was back on the bubble there with about 15 minutes left at Auburn Saturday before things fall apart. And how do you explain to what happened to Tennessee Saturday?
I have no clue how to describe. I mean, they had things going there well. They just couldn't defend coming out of the gate in the second half. And I mean, I think you want to say youth, but by this point, there shouldn't be really any freshmen at this point. You know, they've all, with the exception of Vescovi, they've all been here for a couple months. Even Vescovi has shown that he has that the upper-class mentality. But, it was just complete collapse by the defense there. Offense couldn't find any rhythm going there either, and it just was an awful combination there for the Vols.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at it, they go up 17 with, I believe it's 14:52 left. Bowden hit a mid-range jump shot, and then Vescovi picks up just a mind-numbing foul 85 feet from the basket for his 4th foul. And then I think that's really where things changed, and Jordan Bowden was having an outstanding game. But then you had the fact that Vescovi wasn't in there, Josiah James was playing real poorly. And Auburn always, you look back at what they did last year. Grant Williams played really well in that game at Auburn, but they made it hard for Tennessee to get him the ball, and then they did the same thing in the SEC championship game. That Bruce Pearl's teams are always good at denying the post, and they did the same thing Saturday. Tennessee wasn't able to get John Fulkerson the ball where they wanted him to, and that kind of left Jordan Bowden to run the offense from the point guard shot and score all the points. And from that stretch on, I think it was the 18-0 run was about 6 minutes long. Tennessee turned the ball over 4 times in that stretch and didn't really even get a good look. And, like you said, they really stopped guarding. I thought Auburn stopped settling for threes in the second half too. And, they knocked down the open ones that they got. And, Barnes talked about after the game how many turnovers they had leading the easy transition stuff was his more analysis of the bad defense. But just a poor performance. And what do you make of this team's turnover problems? It seemed like they'd started to kind of gotten a little bit of a hold on it in the middle of the conference play, but you count Arkansas last night, the last 4 games now they've really struggled to take care of the ball.
Yeah, I think what you saw is a lot of what happened in that Auburn game is, they say the most important ability is availability, and for a large portion of the game, Vescovi and Fulkerson were in foul trouble and had to sit on the bench, which puts in young guys against a top 3 in the conference Auburn team that plays defense really well, puts pressure on it. It's a experienced team, and that creates problems for Tennessee's young players. And I just think the moment was a little bit too big for them.
Yeah, and it seemed that way. And a lot of people were criticizing Barnes, for not taking a timeout during that 18-0 run. And I do think he probably should have taken a timeout. But I think that's a little overblown. You have a lot of problems going on in when you blow an 18-point lead. My bigger thing of what I would criticize him for is once Auburn got that game to about 7 points, I don't understand the desire to continue keeping Vescovi on the bench. You're falling apart out there. You can't get good shots. Once you let Auburn retake the lead, and Tennessee did do a pretty good job of fighting back and keeping it competitive after Auburn took the lead. But once Auburn took the lead, the way that building was jumping, the way your team was playing, your chances of winning were slim. It feels arbitrary to try to keep Vescovi out of foul trouble, to have him at the end of the game, where I feel like they would have been much more beneficial of sticking him in the middle of the Auburn run, trying to stop the bleeding a little bit, and providing Bowden with another option, some help on offense, because as much frustrating as Jordan Bowden's season's been for him, and any Tennessee fan and anyone in that locker room, he was absolutely outstanding on Saturday, and Tennessee really wasted what was the best performance of his career, 28 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds on 9 of 12 shooting, 3 of 4 from three-point range, 7 of 7 from the free throw line. And we were talking about that bad stretch. 2 of the shots that he missed were in that stretch where he just kind of had to throw up desperation stuff at the end of the shot clock. But right now, you look at what they've got in the last 3 games. Vescovi's starting to come back down to earth a little bit more. And since Josiah Jordan James, as he played pretty well at South Carolina in his return from injury, but since that, he has really given them not much. And he was pretty abysmal on Saturday with 0 points on 0 of 6 shooting, including some bad turnovers, especially late in the game. And I think you talk about the team's the young nature of this team. I think you saw that because Tennessee was down by 3 with a minute left, and James had a wide open 3, and he turns it down to drive in the basket and ends up turning it over. But a poor performance there, and they come back, and last night against Arkansas, it seemed like the second half of Auburn completely carried over. By the time the game before was the Georgia-South Carolina game and went into overtime. So by the time that they got the broadcast on, the Vols were down by 15 points, and what was a pretty abysmal first half. But they showed some life in the second half, fought back, got it to 2 points at one point. But in the end, what Mason Jones and Isaiah Joe, who was not there for Arkansas in the last game, were able to do, just gave Tennessee too many problems. What were your takeaways from last night?
I just think Arkansas came out much faster. Looking here at the score sheet, during that run, Mason Jones had 2 back-to-back fast breaks, and that shows you how they're bringing more tempo in the game, and Tennessee's not ready to match that coming out of the gate, and that really what allowed the Razorbacks to get ahead. Yeah,
I mean, you talk about that 2 easy baskets for Jones. He's the guy who's a great player for him, and had 1 of 10 in the first game. And then, he's a talented guard. He's an athletic guard. You let him get stuff like that easy early in the game. That just gets him into a rhythm. And, I mean, it was a tale of just complete opposite games from the first game to the second game. He was excellent last night, scoring 37 points, including going 12-15 at the free throw line. And then Isaiah Joe as well. His giving Tennessee another guard to have to deal with is such a big difference right now, just because of the way Tennessee struggles to guard man-on-man pressure. A lot of that's just due to Vescovi's, I don't want to say unathleticism, but he struggles on man-to-man defense at this point in his career. But you look at what Tennessee has done the past, I guess they're just on a 2-game losing skid because they beat a horrible Vanderbilt team at home in a game they didn't play very well.
But in a game that Coach Barnes would tell you they didn't deserve to win.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're coming off of just 2 losses in a row, but really 4 poor performances in a row when you go back to the South Carolina game. And a tough finish, Florida at home, who's starting to play their best basketball of the season, at Kentucky, and then Auburn at home. How does Tennessee save things now? And, I mean, I don't think they're going to make the NCAA tournament. How do they save things, not have this be a season known for the collapse at the end? How do they work their way into the NIT?
I think you've got to try and steal the Florida win, but all around they've got to play smart. They've got to go, as Deontay Wilder said, go out on their shield. Don't lie down, make stupid mistakes, and just get blown off the court in these past games. Let them. If you're going to lose by skill. Play your game, do what you have to do. Make the other teams beat you. Don't lose. Don't beat yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you look at just the turnovers. It's hard to win when you turn the ball over 20+ times, and I mean that's what Rick Barnes is saying, and it's just a lot of it just boils down to that. You can't do that, especially against a team like Auburn on the road in a game that it was funny. I was telling my roommate this. He hadn't seen it. Joe Lunardi had actually tweeted out after the game was over, where it was like, big win for Tennessee at Auburn, Vols back on the bubble. I guess old Joe saw the 17-point spread with 12, 13 minutes left, and thought the Vols won it, but a little twist in the knife there for Tennessee fans. But certainly a disappointing performance, disappointing week for the basketball team, but it has a lot of feels, and Barnes has kind of talked about it. He's compared the teams a little bit. It has a lot of feels to his second team here during Grant Williams' freshman year, where they were in the bubble, kind of on the right side of the bubble in January, before Robert Hubbs, who was, as a senior, was the best player on that team and got injured, and they kind of collapsed late in the season. Obviously, no recent injuries for this team, but it's kind of had a similar feel. But we'll see if they can right the ship Saturday against a Florida team and a Florida program that Rick Barnes has had success against in his time at Tennessee. But moving on a bit to the Lady Vols, they had a little more success than the men did it in Fayetteville, Arkansas last week, but not enough to get a win. They fell at 83-75. It was their fifth straight loss in conference play, falling to 7-6, 17-9, kind of falling their way a bit onto the bubble. On the right side of it still, and then they right the ship a little bit. Sunday against Vanderbilt, they get a win, and the game they also didn't really play great in, 67-63. What do you see this team's issues have been over the past 2 weeks?
Well, I think the lack of depth has finally caught up to them. They're a short team. Well, not in terms of short roster. Like they're definitely one of the taller teams in the league. But I think to their benefit, as much of a hard draw that the men's team got in the closing weeks, women's team got one of the best draws, finishing out the season with the worst 3 teams in the league. So I think that positions them well. I think they can easily finish out this last stretch 3-0. But
yeah, I mean you'd think they kind of have to. They're still. I saw someone, women's basketball bracketologist, was saying they're in for now, but unless they pick up another quality win in an SEC tournament, they could be a little vulnerable, and they're not going to pick up any good wins in the regular season, as you were saying. And those are teams they should easily take care of, but it does add a little pressure because a loss in any of those games could be pretty catastrophic to this team's chances. But that's kind of the interesting thing about this team. They've kind of gone on the chalk all year. They haven't really been upset by anyone. They've mostly taken care of their business, but haven't been able to spring many upsets. I guess they sprung the Notre Dame upset early in the season, but you look at what Notre Dame
is now. That if this game had played now, that probably wouldn't have been an upset.
Yeah, exactly. They've had certainly a tough season with all the people that departed from last year's team. It's going to be an interesting finish for Tennessee. It's kind of the same thing we said all year. Can they find anyone to consistently step up besides Renia Davis? Ray Burrell's been good in the past week or so. She scored 12 in Tennessee's win against Vanderbilt. She scored 21 in Tennessee's loss at Arkansas. But after that, no one scored in double digits in the game at Arkansas. Jordan Horston had a really good game. She struggled a little bit as late. It seemed like she might have been hitting a bit of a freshman wall. But she had a great game against Vanderbilt, scoring 16 points. Can she find some consistency offensively? Can Jasmine Massengale find some consistency offensively? Lou Brown's been dealing with injury. She hasn't been able to give him quite as much as she was earlier in the season. So it'll be a very interesting finish, and certainly a good test for Kelly Harper's bunch in her first season. See if they can handle these pressure-type situations to get back to the NCAA tournament, and then see if they can make a little something happen in the NCAA tournament. Speaking of making things happen, that was the story for the Tennessee baseball team on the weekend. They were off to a nice 4-0 start to the season, had dominated their first 4 opponents, but Western Illinois, Charlotte, nothing to write home about. They go to Texas for the weekend. They face a Texas Tech team that was number 1 in one poll, number 5 in the D1 baseball poll, a top 5 team in basically every baseball poll, and they go out and play outstanding, win 6-2, and then follow that up, no hangover the next 2 days, 8-4 win over Houston, 7-2 win over Stanford. I'll start with the Texas Tech game. How impressed were you with this team's ability to come just right from the first inning, jump on them, really not let up, and just were consistently the best team against one of the best 5 teams in the country?
I think you saw in the opening season or the opening series is this team had the potential, played really well, but there's always that question of it's Western Illinois. How much does this really mean? That was actually Western Illinois' first time outside this spring, so It was always a question of yes, but what's going to happen when they knew this was going to be this good litmus test down in Texas. I think they definitely acquitted themselves really well. They played their game. They executed. Pitching continued on. Continued to hit the long ball and just take care of business there.
Yeah, I mean, the long ball you talk about, that was, and it still is to a degree, but that was my biggest question. They hit for power so well in the first 4 games with some guys that didn't hit for much power as freshmen a year ago, and you wonder, can they keep this up? Can a guy like Zach Daniels be consistent against top-level pitching? And then within the first 2 innings against Texas Tech, you have a Jordan Beck, who's a freshman, home run, Jake Rucker, home run, Zach Daniels inside the park, home run. And they just immediately answered those questions, and they didn't let up. And the story of the weekend, I feel like, really has to be the pitching out of the bullpen. I mean, the pitching as a whole was outstanding, but for Tennessee to be down 4 pitchers right now, the ace Garrett Crochet, Camden Sewell, who's a guy who will compete for a SEC weekend starter spot, Jason Racker is a guy who before the season they thought could compete for a weekend starter spot. I'm not sure now, he's missed so much time with mono. That'll be a bit of a problem. And then Will Heflin, a very valuable senior left-handed arm, to be short all those guys and to still just get incredible production out of the bullpen. You go game by game. In the first game against Texas Tech, Sean Hunley out of the bullpen gave them 4 innings, scoreless, gave up 1 hit, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts, and 5 strikeouts was something that stood out to me. He's a guy that is just his first 2 years gotten outs, but 90 mile per hour fastball, not striking out a lot of guys. A pitch to contact guy. His breaking ball's improved. He's really gotten a lot better. And then in the win over Houston, you have Jackson Leaf throw 4.2 innings out of the bullpen, give up 2 hits, 1 run, wasn't earned, strikeout 8. Absolutely, just incredible performance from him. And then, as we talked about, the lack of pitching depth, they only got an inning and 2/3 out of the starter, Elijah Pleasance, on Sunday. But Drew Gilbert, as a freshman, comes in, gives them good innings, and Redmond Walsh, kind of the best guy in that bullpen, gives them 3 scoreless to close it out. But just an overall very impressive weekend. It gets pretty easy now until conference play. What do you think this team needs to show in the next 8 games now, the rest of this homestand?
Well, I think they've got to keep up this pace. I think the biggest thing is when you're going on playing this string of lower quality teams is keeping your mind sharp, keeping your preparation. Keep working hard in practice, keep attacking every day with that same intensity, and just not focusing on. You got to keep focusing on what's to come, not what you're dealing with right now.
2 guys that are more the veteran, proven guys on this team have struggled a little bit this year. Evan Russell hit a home run last night. Al Solari also hit a home run last night, but Evan Russell just hitting 250 so far in the season, and Alex Solari just hitting 179 so far in the season. Any level of concern there with the slower starts from those 2 guys?
No, I think, baseball, you're going to have some times where you're just down in a slump. Those 2 have shown they're great players. And, to look at it from an analytical point of view, the sample size is not really significant at this point.
Yeah.
So I think if it continues on, before we get to SEC play, then that could be an issue. But otherwise, I think you got to trust that they're going to break through any day now.
Yeah, especially for a guy like Solari, it just feels like it's a matter of time. The pitching staff, what do you think? How do you think this thing shakes out when everybody gets back? And I'll start it with this. Do you? I know you don't. No one has a great idea of when it'll be. How long do you think they'll hold out Sewell and Crochet? Do you think they'll get any action before SEC play, or do you think it's a thing that they're really just targeting that first weekend against South Carolina?
I think it'll be a little before. I don't think Coach Vitello would put in his starter like that. First off against SEC play. The whole point of this preseason-ish area non-conference schedule is to get everyone ready, and of a position of such importance as starting pitcher, you want him to get that practice against some lower quality, so that when it does come time for the South Carolina series, that he's ready. So I think they want to focus on the SEC schedule. They want to get them ready for that.
So back to the kind of question I was starting with. When they get those guys back, one, how do you think would you best project the weekend rotation to fill out? Second, how do you think the bullpen shakes out? Do you think they just go less use on guys, less of this long extension, long inning relief pitchers, or do you think some guys will see a little bit less playing time, see their role really diminish?
I think Crochet will probably be your ace, your Friday starter. But other than that, I think it's very wide open. I say it's probably a little more set going into the season, but now with the way everyone else has played going on through these games, it'll open up a lot. I think Leith will definitely get some looks for starter, but I think it's going to be interesting. Coming out of the bullpen, I think Coach Vitello is probably going to use a mix depending on the game. You're probably going to see a lot more guys used, and instead of trying to stretch guys out, get them for as much as they can, and then because he realizes that he has such depth in his back pocket that I think he's going to utilize that.
Yeah, I think when you get into SEC play and you see this pitching staff be more complete, I think you'll see less of a guy like Sean Hundley going 4 innings on Friday and then sitting him out for the rest of the weekend. I think you'll maybe see more more traditional MLB style bullpen, 2-1-1, and then be able to use a guy like Hundley, a guy like Leaf, multiple times on the weekend. But it'll be an interesting schedule to follow. It's pretty soft here until we get into conference play in 2 weeks. They will take on 3 games against George Washington, who has a pretty solid program this weekend. One of their better mid-major teams will take on the rest of this pre-SEC slate before a midweek game with Longwood and a 3-game series with Wright State, and then they'll host ETSU on March 10th before going to South Carolina on March 13th through 15th for their SEC opening series. That'll do it for this edition of the Checkerboard Chat. For Ryan Cruz, I am Ryan Schumpert. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.